We are. Well, welcome everybody. I am very excited and honored to introduce Luís Fernandez Guedes Pinto. Fernando, sorry, where did that come from? Sorry. And then I was going to say, but it's very true that I've known you for over 28 years, so I should have gotten that right. Because I think I was figuring we first met when we were both working for the Rainforest Alliance or with the Rainforest Alliance on this new thing called Forest Stewardship Council certification. And yeah, the rest is history. From time to time, I've been fortunate to cross paths with Luís Fernando, and it has been a real pleasure. And you've been quite an important person in your field. So at the time you were working in Anima Flora, and now you're director of SOS Mata Atlantica, and also have served on a lot of international boards on sustainability issues, including certification, like the ICL Alliance. And in your spare time, you're a professor at the School of Conservation and Sustainability, ISCAS-IPE?
Yes.
Yes. So I don't know where you find time for it all, but thank you for all your work. And with great pleasure, I'll hand the floor over to you. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm very, very happy and honored to be here, as I have told some of you. I was a visitor here in 2011. I came to Oxford with my family. It was a sabbatical time at Flora. And there was a seminar here at the end of this period. It was about the Forest Code, which was voted in 2012. So it was just about a big discussion and mass, and the presentation here was about this governance policy that was very, very important. So it's an honor to be here with you, everyone who is online as well. And I'm going to share with the title is The Crossroad of the Atlantic Forest. So I'll try to bring you what this crossroad is about, what is the issues. I'll introduce briefly SOS Mata Atlantica. Just to tell everyone, we receive students from Oxford every year. They apply to the careers office to the summer internship program. So we receive from 1 to 2 students every year. One is about to arrive in a few weeks. They apply. You! Nice to meet you. Welcome. I hope you have a great time. Very happy to receive you. We are very, very happy to receive you. But let's talk about the Atlantic Forest. So first, a little bit about our organization. SOS Mata Atlantica was created in 1986. We are 40 years old organization, kind of an old NGO. We were created before Rio 92, and we supported and organized Brazilian civil society to participate of Rio 92 at that time. And our mission is to inspire society to protect the Atlantic Forest. So we are not going to save the Atlantic Forest. We need to inspire our society to be engaged in the protection and conservation of the Atlantic Forest. We work with advocacy, monitoring of the biome, campaigns, mobilization, and on the ground, we work on protected areas where you are going to work with us, right? A database about protected areas with forest restoration, so we plant forests, and also with clean water. We just released a report about the Tietê River yesterday, about the many kinds of pollutants that we have in this river. But let's go to the crossroads. First, the Atlantic Forest. It's one of the 6 Brazilian biomes. Anyone who wants the presentation, we can share. So it occupies 130 million hectares in Brazil. It's 15% of our territory. It's bigger than 2 Frances. And it's from south to north, from east to west, and from the coastline until 3,000, almost 3,000 meters high. So it means it has a huge diversity of ecosystems or phytophysiognomies. Do you say that in English? Phytophysiognomies? Physiognomies, so many types of ecosystems, from dry forests to humid forests, grasslands, mangroves, savannas. We have many different types of vegetation in this biome. So the diversity, each color is a different kind of forest. So the dark green is moist. This is transitional, stationary, semi-decidual. We have mangroves, the Araucaria forest here in the middle, mixed, dense, many types of vegetation, and a great diversity of ecosystem. Dry forests here in the middle of the Caatinga and the Cerrado. This biome, this forest has millions of years of history. 30,000 years ago, it met the Amazon. They used it to map here in Bahia and many other places, but after the last ice age, the Cerrado and Caatinga came in the middle. And it has a history, a long history, right? Which determines this forest, this biome. And the history with humans. There is some controversial time when Homo sapiens arrived in America, but let's take 11 to 12,000 years ago, humans arrived in the Americas and in the Atlantic forest, and they have lived and transformed the forest, but they have not destroyed the forest. They have transformed it. It's not that it was intact. The indigenous people changed these ecosystems, but they kept the ecosystems. The history of destruction starts in when the Portuguese arrived here in the 16th century. And it's very well reported beautifully in this book. I don't know if there is an international translation. A Ferro e Fogo, it's an American. He died just 1 year after. He published this book in 1995. Warren Dean, it's wonderful. Well, the identity of the Atlantic forest is biodiversity. Very diverse, very endemic, very threatened, very unique. It is in the 2000s, the biodiversity hotspot paper, it was the #2 hotspot in the world. I guess it has never been updated, so it remains as a top biodiversity hotspot in terms of trees, animals, many types of life. And it's also a place of where the Brazilian culture was crafted. Can I say that? Crafted?
Yeah.
And throughout our history, where the Europeans, the indigenous, and the, I don't know how you say now in English, enslaved black people. Slavery. In Brazil now you have to say slavery. Do you have this word?
Yeah, enslaved, maybe?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's where these people got together in a violent way, of course, very violent way, but it's where our Brazilian culture was crafted. This is where samba started, capoeira, feijoada, acarajé, everything started in the Brazilian Atlantic forest. Now have the favelas, the black people, the poor people. The culture is very important as well. Well, this is the Brazilian biome most destroyed along our history, and is the one which remains the least original vegetation cover. So you can see the colors. In light green is the original cover of the biome, and dark green is what has remained. But it also is where 70% of the Brazilian population lives. 80% of the GDP depend on the ecosystem services of this biome. 50% of food production is still cropped and harvested in this biome as well. It was recognized as a national heritage by our constitution. Here comes Connie about governance. It's where your field comes in. And it's being protected by a special law since 2006. Now we are celebrating 20 years of Lei da Mata Atlântica, which is a very important benchmark in governance for tropical forests in Brazil and across the world. And it was recognized as a flagship of the UN Decade on Ecosystems Restoration, what means it's important for Brazil, but also important to the world. I'm trying to say that because the world doesn't know about the Atlantic forest anymore, so we're trying to remind. And it became relevant for climate change when restoration came as a nature-based solution. While the issue was only about stopping deforestation, the Atlantic forest didn't exist to the world because it only the Amazon, because the emissions are much, much, much higher, because deforestation is much, much higher, because deforestation happened here before, right? But when restoration became a solution, very important to achieve the Paris Agreement, then we built a narrative that the Atlantic forest is important for climate change globally and to tackle the biodiversity crisis as well. It's been hard, but we have tried. I like very much this map we built with Erica. Erica is in London today, right? Erica Beringer. We wrote a paper about the governance lessons from the Atlantic forest to the Amazon. And just to see that is just the opposite situation. The Amazon has lost 20% of its forest cover and is almost what has remained in the Atlantic forest. Although we found that in some regions of the Amazon, we already have some situations Atlantic forest like in terms of fragmentation and destruction. But besides low forest cover, what remains is unevenly distributed. Unevenly, so it's distributed in a very unequal way in the country. So this is from that data from biomes and by municipality. So places in red are municipalities that have less than 15% of forest cover. We have some municipalities in Brazil here in the sugarcane area that have less than 1% or 5%, while here we have more than 50%. So the situation is that the whole number is 24% left, but actually it varies a lot across countries. So Pernambuco, Bahia, so there are places here very, very threatened, right? And very, very important. And besides that, 90% of the fragments are smaller than 50 hectares, quite small. 11% of this whole area is in protected areas, considering indigenous lands and conservation units. And there is a lot of APAs here that are conservation units that don't protect too much. So if we consider only indigenous lands and full protection, conservation units is less than 5%, very low. And 80% of the left vegetation is in private lands. It's completely different from the Amazon as a whole. Little left, fragmented, small patches, private. Very little protected by law. So the governance is very different. Landowners here are much more important than anyone else. Besides that, these are complicated figures. I'm not going into details. This is from Renato Lima, published in 2020. Besides destruction, deforestation, we have degradation. So everything here that is red or yellow means we are losing biomass, we are losing richness, we are losing other important properties for conservation. So the quality of what remains is poor, right? This is the message. Renato also published with other colleagues this review of the risk of extinction of species, putting together the 5,000 species of trees of the Atlantic forest, 5,000. And he found that most of the trees, all populations together, critical 9%, endangered 40%, vulnerable 14%. So if you put all this together, is 41, 50, 60% is in any level of risk extinction. If we consider the endemic trees, even more. So the crossroad, so far, I have brought the bad news, right? The risks of extinction. And then the map shows the intensity there in red and yellow, where they are, the risk of extinction of tree species. And more than 60% of the endangered animal species of Brazil occur in the Atlantic forest. We have an official list from IBGE in Brazil, and they update this list, so the latest version brings this number. But let's try to bring some other good news. No, still bad news. 80% of the alerts and events of extreme events due to climate change occur in the Atlantic forest and where most of the population live. and of course, it affects the poor people. Right? This year, Petrópolis, this year we had again Rio Grande do Sul. Every year we have something serious. The El Niño from this year may repeat that situation there. In Rio Grande do Sul, it was a risk, but now we know it may happen. But I guess now we start with good news. SOS Mata Atlântica is a founding organization of MAP Biomas. I don't know if you ever heard about that. You're gonna hear a lot about it. I'm part of the coordination of MAP Biomas nationally. And what we have learned in the short history, MAP Biomas is history trajectories from Landsat up to the latest year. So all our series start in 1985. Tasso is the leader. Do you still keep in touch with him? Tasso Azevedo, remember him?
Gosh, well, yeah, well, I remember him very well.
He's the driving force of
Yeah.
MAP Biomas.
Okay.
And so a lot of changes in 40 years. We mostly lost forest in the period, 3 million hectares. We, from 35 to 32 million hectares, savannas, we lost 2 million hectares. Pastures decreased and agriculture increased. The urban area increased 4 times, but it's quite small, but it's amazing, the urbanization of the region. But the good news is that after the publication of the Atlantic Forest Law, this is the lesson of governance, we started to gain 800,000 hectares after. So we lose and gain, but the net gain is positive since the publication of the law. This is called Bolsonaro, right? There is a time that it increased. You're going to see more detail later on. But the good news, this is the deforestation of mature forest. SOS Mata Atlântica and INPE have monitored the loss of, we call mature forests. Since 1985, it's a long-term relationship, partnership between INPE and SOS Mata Atlântica. And oops, again, this is the effect of the Atlantic Forest Law. And we are going low. This is called Bolsonaro again. But the good news is last year, we had the lowest rate ever. For the first year below 10,000 hectares, 8,000 hectares. It's the lowest ever. So we have now a plan. I don't know if you heard, we have plans for prevention and fighting against deforestation for every Brazilian biome. In the beginning, only for the Amazon, called PPCDAN, then for Cerrado, and the current government built for every biome a plan. So it's also a result of that. We can talk in more details. And we have a lot of secondary vegetation. 22% of the forest cover in the Atlantic forest is secondary, 78. Of course, it has changed over time, right? Since we have monitored by satellite images. So this is very important as well. But now a bad message. No, this is still a good message. This is work from Marcos Rosa, shows red means places where we are losing forest, and dark red, they are getting far or further?
Depends on the context.
They're going further apart. Blue is neutral, and dark blue, they are getting closer. The ecological meaning, right? So we have simultaneously loss and gain, and it depends on the geography. We have states like Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo, which have had a forest transition already. They have gained forest in the last 40 years net, although we still lose. And agriculture is the main pressure, right? 95% of deforestation here is agriculture in large areas, but we also have many, many small deforestation patches around big cities and in the coastline because of tourism, urban expansion, etc. Okay? So this is very important to understand simultaneous processes and different geographies where each thing happens. because agriculture is still expanding here in Paraná, Santa Catarina. This paper hasn't worked in here. And then we made this policy brief last year that in 3 decades, this is the MapBiomas data as well, we gained 5 million hectares of forest, secondary vegetation. It's a lot. Is this bigger than the state of Rio de Janeiro for who has it's a lot. 5 million hectares is a lot. However, 22% was cut again. We call ephemeral recovery, and this is what we call permanent recovery. So secondary vegetation, most remains, but some part we lose. And we have understood where we lose, but I'm not going into details. Because of that, is it too fast? Are you following? I'm about to finish. So this is the deforestation of primary vegetation in red and orange of secondary vegetation. So over time, the importance of secondary vegetation loss is increasing. In 2024, 50% of the forest lost is secondary vegetation, but we still, the other 50 is still primary. Primary for the Atlantic forest is not exactly primary because we don't have the original forest in most of the regions. But this is very important for any policy considering zero deforestation as well. So now, just to finish, what about this crossroad? What are we saying? That depends on which side of the picture we see. So I try to bring 2 different perspectives. The more pessimistic, can I say that? The worst scenario is recognizing it's very little left. It's fragmented and isolated, degraded. Private owned could be a strength, but it's a weakness. In the Amazon, 50% of deforestation is in public lands. So anyway, it's an important point. Degraded, who knows about the Atlantic forest? Even Brazilians don't know anymore. This is the logo of our organization, SOS Mata Atlântica, and it was a campaign from the 80s, and it was there taking the green from our forest. At that moment, this forest meant the Atlantic forest for Brazilians. Oh, this is the forest. Then they happened to know and learn about the Amazon, and they forgot about the Atlantic forest. And today, who knows? So even the Brazilians don't know, where is the Atlantic forest in the Amazon? I have heard that from senators, important people. And internationally, much less. So we are building this narrative that the Atlantic forest is important globally to tackle both the climate, the water, and the biodiversity crisis. It's not that simple, but now Brazilian governments and many policies and international policies now bring the other biomes, not only the Atlantic forest here. But we are saying the Atlantic forest is the tropical forest for Brazil. So the TFFF, Tropical Forest Facility Forever, it's applicable the Amazon and the Atlantic forest only, because they are the Brazilian tropical forests. The other biomes are not tropical forests, mostly, although they have forests as part of the ecosystem. So this is a Brazilian tropical forest. It's been very dependent on 4 years political cycle in Brazil. Everything, not only deforestation, poverty, hunger. So it's up and down depending on who is the president. We hope to keep the current administration despite all its controversies and contradictions. But regarding forests, there is a consistent policy. We can discuss other issues, but very important. Well, it's 4 years. It may be up and down. Here it's always down. In the Congress, pressure against environmental protection permanently. Our organization works daily in the Congress. Most of our energy is monitoring what's happening in Brazil. And we have governance to reduce deforestation. And if there is a place in Brazil where it happens, is in the Atlantic forest, because it has more protection than any other biome in Brazil. But we don't know how to end it, and even how to keep it low. It has happened to the Amazon and maybe to the Atlantic forest, to the Cerrado. So we know how to control illegal deforestation. We know the policies, the instruments that work to put it down, but we don't know how to keep, and we don't have policies to lead to zero, which is a Brazilian commitment publicly until 2030, right? And this is a major issue because we have committed, but we don't have policies enough to reach it. The command and control policies are in the limit, and then we have to bring the positive agenda, bioeconomy, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a big deal. The other side of the crossroad, well, so this route may lead us to the extinction of the Atlantic forest in some regions of Brazil. In some, it's been extinct already, but this route would increasing deforestation, keeping isolated, fragmented, degraded, few people, well, changes in political, deforestation may increase again, we don't know. So it's a bad route, considering it's been very fragile, but also resilient ecologically, right? And finally, the good side, well, we have a very high level. You three work where? In which place of Brazil?
Today, mostly Cerrado in the Amazon. My background is Atlantic forest. Yeah.
Most of us started with it. And you? And you? Rio de Janeiro. And your research is? APAS in the Atlantic forest. So we have a lot to talk about. Rio de Janeiro is doing a good job, despite all the crazy things going there. Yeah. But the environmental secretary, we have a good dialogue with them. It's surprising. Conservation units, instruments for distributing. It's an interesting case. Are you from the governance or biological? From the university. Okay. But studying governance or biodiversity? Interesting. Nice. So we have a wonderful science community and knowledge. We know a lot. There are many gaps, but this knowledge is not a barrier to reach zero deforestation, to reach restoration in a high scale. It's not a barrier. But we always need to learn more. Again, I put the same sentence here as a strength, that we know how to reduce deforestation, but don't know how to end it. We have policies for restoration. The forest code that I came here in 2011 to say it was horrible, but we need to recognize its strengths. Planaveg, which is a national plan for the recovery of national vegetation. It's basically a plan to support the implementation of the forest code. I could blame has not been implemented, but we have the policy. We have our commitments for zero deforestation, and it's crucial to keep secondary vegetation, foster the recovery, but we cannot lose any other tree of mature forest in this biome. Zero, right? Every place we are losing species, we are losing things we don't know, and recovery may take decades, centuries, or never if we have extinction. But our issue here is about the importance of ecosystem services. So if the Atlantic forest collapses, ecosystem services collapses, and the most important region of the economy, our country for economy, and most of the population may collapse together. So it's not only beautiful, it's important and necessary and urgent for the Brazilians and for the world. This is the NGO claim we're trying to build. There is a lot of restoration going on. There is science, there is technology. There is a recent paper about a systematic review of literature on restoration in the world. Most comes from Brazil and the Atlantic forest. So most of the science technologies, there is a collective pact of, I don't know if you ever heard, Pacto pela Restauração da Mata Atlântica, is a coalition of 300 organizations which brings together NGOs, companies, governments, and science to build solutions for the restoration of the Atlantic forest. This is why it was recognized by the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. And then as a multinational initiative, because the Atlantic forest is also in Argentina and Paraguay. 90% is in Brazil, but it's also in Paraguay and Argentina, and most left, the Argentina and Paraguay are losing a lot currently in a rate that is much faster than Brazil. So we have silviculture, agroforest. For the Atlantic forest, it's crucial how we crop. Keeping with monocropping, I'm honored to have you in the room. We met in Belém, COP30, said, Vinder, let's keep in touch. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much. So keeping producing soy, corn, sugarcane as monocultures, it will be a major barrier for the recovery of the Atlantic forest. So the ecological metrics, right, matters a lot, especially in such a situation that is little left, fragmented, and degraded. So the neighborhood matters a lot, and we need to change how we play. So we have all this narrative that is a solution, etc., for mitigation, adaptation, etc. So these are the main messages. So the crossroad means we are trying to be positive, that we can reach the positive route. We can reach, it's not impossible. It's very possible to reach it. It really depends on political will, in leadership, in investments. It's not simple, but we have to, as an NGO, as a scientist, I may sometimes, what I read says we're about to die, right? But science also says we can tackle our main challenges. The IPCC report says, the summary report says, we have the capital, the science to reach Paris. It's a matter of taking decisions. So we need to tell the youth, mostly the youth, that it's possible. Simple? No, but it's possible. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate your attention. And I'm here if you are interested to talk more about our organization or the Atlantic Forest or anything else.
Excellent. So yeah, we have time for questions.
If you
Okay,
want.
then let's have a few sort of group collective questions. So yeah, absolutely. And then maybe you can hang out afterwards to talk to people or whatever. I'm sure they're. Oh, the microphone. Yes. Oh, okay. Yes, questions. Right. Well, someone's monitoring online, right, Carlin? Okay. So yeah, any questions in person here from the audience? Yep. Yeah. Okay.
Luís, congratulations. Thank you for the presentation. Congratulations the job you are developing for Atlantic Forest for so many years. I have, I want to hear about you. It's not exactly a question. You mentioned the Rio de Janeiro state as example. What we are finding there is the forests growing and the agriculture is reducing. There is almost cause and effect. We can see in state of Rio de Janeiro, but it not represent the behavior in the whole biome. Okay, it's good, of course. The forest is growing. The problem is who is losing area for which agriculture is losing area in state of Rio de Janeiro. There we have small farmers, people who live from the agriculture. It's not exactly companies, big properties. It's totally different, of course, from São Paulo and other states. And you gave a lot of importance about the legal reserves, the part of the properties which by law we need to keep forested and other areas from our legislation. I want to hear from you a little more of the scenario. You showed very quickly one slide, and if you can explain better the difference between the states or in the regions of Brazil, please.
Okay, it's not a simple question.
Yeah.
I want to hear your answer to your question. But, well, first, the Atlantic forest, Brazil has one of the highest land inequality distribution across the world, right? Since the Portuguese arrived, since the Sesmarias, Capitanias Hereditárias, so Brazil is a place where land is highly, highly concentrated. It varies across the country. Monocropping is mostly in the big properties, large properties. The Cerrado is where I saw this number, is where there is a index for land distribution called Gini. Gini is an index of distribution, not for concentration. So the Brazilian Gini is 80.7, 0.8. If it's one, means one person owns everything, right? Cerrado has the highest Gini index of Brazil as a biome. The Atlantic forest and Caatinga have the lowest. So the Atlantic forest theoretically has lower land concentration, although it's high, because the Gini is more than 0.5, it's 0.6. But it's different from the Amazon, from Cerrado. We have more smallholder, more small farms, but it varies across the country. So I'll bring maps here. I like this one. This is the deficit of vegetation, where it's less, where we have less large properties. São Paulo, sugarcane area. Rio de Janeiro, and Espírito Santo. Espírito Santo and Santa Catarina have the lowest index of Gini of Brazil. So Santa Catarina is a state where we have a less concentrated, but be caution about that. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. So, and then it matters, the land tenure structure influences cropping and vice versa, and the value of crops. And the highest deficits of the forest code are in these red areas as well. Mato Grosso do Sul, Mato Grosso, São Paulo. So the big guys are those who have more debits, environmental debits. But they make more profits. So we need, I try to get to the point, we need special policies for smallholders. And these policies are not about conservation, but how they have income and they make crop. They cannot grow soy. They need to grow food for their schools, for the municipality. So it matches many different policies for conservation. I'm not sure if it's a very complex question.
Just following on that, and then I'll hand the microphone over to the next person and we can go online. But I just was wondering, I mean, are there many policies that are designed specifically for smallholders? Is there a movement to do this in that area?
It depends on, you mean policies for conservation or for agriculture?
Well, for helping the smallholders, I guess, or yeah.
There are policies. PRONAF is credit for smallholders to crop. There are some PRONAF lines that are for conservation as well. So yes, there are, but they are very contradictory. From one side, they support smallholders, but they may finance deforestation directly or indirectly. And there are less policies for smallholders for conservation, I would say. But it's kind of out of my expertise. I am afraid I can say not the most accurate answers, so I will avoid trying to answer all, if you don't mind.
Sure. Okay.
Our visitor,
Yeah, thank you so much for this. It's been
it's gonna
especially
be
useful for
cold
me.
there, right? This week
Yeah,
is
I was on a
very
call with
cold
Diego
there.
yesterday, and he's like it's 13 degrees. So
Yeah.
happy to escape the heat though, to be honest. Yeah, so thank you very much. I have a question about the ephemeral regeneration. Why is that happening? Is it kind of the same processes for like regular deforestation, or is there something different or like more specific going on with that?
Thank you. We found that forest recovery is happening basically in sloping lands, in areas that are protected by law that should be restored. We call APPs. There are areas of full protection inside private farms. So it should be forest there, and it was abandoned and it's protected. So it's been, most of what is permanent is in lands that are either protected or have low feasibility for cropping. And then we are losing in those lands that are arable. And the Atlantic Forest Law, it protects secondary and old growth forests. So these forests can only be cut in exceptional circumstances for social purpose or public interest. However, young forests less than 10 years old may be cut. So what our hypothesis, we haven't tested that, is that they abandon their land, but before they reach 10 years in arable lands, they cut again. As a bank reservoir of potential land that can be used either by smallholders or large farms. We call POSEO. It's inside the law. The Atlantic Forest Law is not a zero deforestation law. It was designed in 2006. It gives much more protection than any other forest in Brazil, but it was not designed as a zero deforestation. This is easier to answer.
Are there questions? Okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I've got a question from online. It's from Eve Nelson, and she works for 3Keel, including a focus on DCF commodity supply chains. And she was wondering whether you think consultants can support or advise businesses regarding the Atlantic forest specifically.
Yes, they can. These companies should know about everything I'm saying here. But 20% of soybeans cropped in Brazil is in the Atlantic forest. People think it's only in the Cerrado, in the Amazon. 20% of the cattle herd is in the Atlantic forest, right? So these export crops are important. They are traded with deforestation. We have worked with Trace. I don't know if you ever heard the Trace guys in Stockholm and Global Canop here in Corn Market. So we have worked with them and we have traced most of the soybeans and beef remains in Brazil, but we still have deforestation from the Atlantic forest going internationally, mostly to China. So it's important to advise, of course. But I'd like to remind that these companies have stepped back from the soy moratorium. And they have a lot of advice, what it means. So it's important, but there is a lot of pushback in all these private mechanisms. I don't know if you agree, Connie, if it's a worldwide processes or a Brazilian.
Yeah.
The private voluntary mechanisms, there is strong pressure against them from some stakeholders, but they are very important. I still think so.
Got it for online. Other questions? Yeah, maybe could you say a few words, Luís Fernando, about your work with the Mata Atlântica through the SOS Mata Atlântica, and also maybe is your organization engaging in any way with the EU deforestation regulation? Yeah, maybe a few words about that.
Very little, because most of the attention is to Cerrado and the Amazon. We have the Atlantic Forest Law, which gives more protection. But the Atlantic Forest is part of the EU regulation, so we could not have exports from farms that have deforestation, but people are not paying attention. This is what this question comes from. There is little, but there is. So the EU regulation is applicable to commodities in the Atlantic forest. The proportion of deforestation of these commodities in the Atlantic forest is much, much, much less important, but they're applicable. About our organization, so we work, our main objective as an organization is to have public policies for the conservation and restoration of the biome. So we are mostly an advocacy organization, although we have 4 people in our advocacy team only. We are much smaller in terms of money and number of people than Greenpeace, World Wildlife Fund, other NGOs in Brazil, but we are very noisy. Very noisy. We have a lot of power, and we have one person every day in the Congress monitoring everything, and we meet with Congress people and the president and ministries, etc. But it's a lot of our work. To support advocacy, we have knowledge production. So I have 2 rats inside the organization. I'm the executive director, and I'm also the knowledge director who interacts with science. We are not a science organization, but we interact a lot, and we produce reports and data about the situation of biomes. So Atlas da Mata Atlântica is the annual data about deforestation with ink, is led by us. We are part of Map Biomas. We report data about the Atlantic forest and many other things. So we have a lot of interest to interact and contribute, collaborate with you in terms of science. In our board, we have scientists also. And we work, so to support advocacy, we have knowledge, and we have mobilization of people, communication, engagement that in the past was campaigning, put people in the streets. Now we put people in social media, but we still build campaigns to engage people to be part of it. We put a lot of energy on it, although we have 5 people in our mobilization team, but we are very noisy. And then we have, again, this work on the ground. We have, in restoration, we have planted more than 43 million trees, which has contributed to restoring more than 23,000 hectares of forests. Probably one of the NGOs that have planted more forests in Brazil so far, although others are doing a great job as well, like IP, ISA, many others. 23,000 hectares for our NGO is a lot. For the Atlantic forest is nothing. But our role is demonstration. And then conservation units, we work a lot with the federal government, ICMBio, which is the federal agency which works with protected areas. The same that Trump just destroyed in the US, I don't know the number. He just destroyed, right? The parks unit there, something.
Yeah.
So we interact, we have agreements, we support conservation units with many different ways. And also we support the creation of public-private reserves. I don't know if you ever heard about RPPNs. It's a category at the IUCN that is private reserves. So we have supported the creation of more than 500. This is your job in 3 weeks to work with this issue. And water is very important for us because the rivers tell who we are. And the rivers are part of the biome. We are a team of 60, almost 70 people. The executive team is about 50 people. So considering our size, we are quite small, but I consider a very, very noisy and successful organization. We fund ourselves from companies and philanthropy, different types of sources of money every day, going for money to do what we need to do. For those who want to be part of civil society, part of the job is to get the money to do what we have to do. That's it in a few words. You are all invited to visit us. Our office now, our headquarters is in a 500 hectares farm where we have restored 400 hectares. It's a farm owned by Heineken, and they have supported us to restore this farm to guarantee water for their beverage factory across a few kilometers from us. It's an interesting case. In a few words, we are part of many collective organizations in Brazil. Brazil has a very, very strong and organized civil society. So we have individual strong NGOs, but we have collective power. So we are founding member of Rede Mata Atlântica, which is a network of NGOs of the Atlantic Forest. We are founding member of Observatório do Clima, which brings together hundreds, I guess, of organizations from indigenous people, NGOs, for collective advocacy. We are founding members of Pacta Mata Atlântica, many other organizations that are very important collectively, not only for the Atlantic Forest, but also for civil society in Brazil. I also reinforce that sometimes our role is just to fight for democracy. It's not only for nature as an organization. So our mission is that enforce nature, but sometimes democracy and rights, because it's all together.
Excellent.
I wanted to just briefly, we can talk about fires.
Fires, when I grew up in Campinas region, and
I'm from Campinas.
Indaiatuba.
I'm living in Piracicaba.
Well, I went to Exalc, and we would only
You are
see.
from Exalc. We'll talk later.
Okay, we would only see fires in August when it's really windy and just by the side of roads, and it wasn't such a big deal as it is now. But as you've seen in 2024, well, the whole country burned, but we've seen even croplands that are cash, like all the sugarcane plantations in that region, everything burned as well. So it kind of crossed that weird threshold where you wouldn't think that the farmers wanted their crops to burn, but who's setting those fires? Are they criminal? Is intent? Is it not? Like, is it a political message? Or the whole thing in Mata Atlântica seems connected to everything that's happening in the Cerrado and the Amazon, but somehow also different because of the different history and all that. So how are you guys working on the fire issue as a climate change fueled problem?
Well, we don't act specifically with fire. We published a report about fire about 2024 with map biomes, because we got all the data from the, I don't know if you visit the fire platform of map biomes. So we built a report because it was so surprising what happened that year, that we tried to understand, and we brought all the data together. So 25% of the fires were in native vegetation, and the other 75 was in cropping areas. But we don't really act individually. We are not experts in fire. Of course, we are concerned about fire is a major vector of degradation, and in this all here, right? Because it's dry. Everything here is dry, so it's a major risk. I don't know if you also know that map biomes has a degradation module. I'm a crazy guy for map biomes, right? So because it brings so much information. But I'm not an expert. We work not as organization which really knows a lot about it, but we interact with. But it's a major driver of degradation, especially if you think that 90% of the fragments are smaller than 50 hectares and they're surrounded by crops and pastures. Farmers don't, what I say that I think it's, again, different from the Amazon. Do you have a few minutes more?
Yeah. sure,
Fire,
around
yeah,
it,
fire in the Amazon, part of the fire is a way to occupy land. So the Amazon, there is a battle for land and deforestation. Well, Erica could tell hours about fire. I'm not taking the risk in her place to talk much about that. But fire is a way to occupy land. This is not the situation in the Atlantic forest because the land tenure situation is more or less solved. The same process that occurs now in the Amazon occurred in the Atlantic forest, land grabbing, violence, everything. The same movie run there centuries ago, years ago. So fire in the Atlantic forest is, I think so, accident, also still bad practices, pastures, cleaning pastures. So it comes from agriculture, but it's a different context. Of course, with climate change and dry seasons, it's gonna become a higher risk much more frequently, and we need plans to prevent fire everywhere in Brazil. Especially now I'm gonna put my steps inside the Advinder's place. But the IPCC squares, it's gonna be wetter here and drier here. But stream droughts may happen here as well. Correct? So it's a constant and permanent risk for something that has so little left. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was, yeah, so much to think about. Thanks so much. A very rich talk. One more round of applause. We can hear you. Yes,
Thank
you'll
you.
have to make a submission. Update us.
We receive students, visitors, everybody. Ask her experience, but our visitors have liked it very much one day. I hope they